Nervous system damage. Now, when we're talking about damage to the nervous system, we're looking at the brain, the spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. We can damage it by injuring it or by starving it. When we look at injuring it, we're looking at sources from the outside of the body and from those from the inside. From the outside of the body, we have accidents. We can have nerves or the spinal cord is crushed or severed. We can have peripheral nerves that are crushed or severed. We can have a blow to the head. From the inside, from inside the body, the nerves can be damaged from infections, from autoimmunity, and from tumors. When we're talking about starving it, we're talking about starving the cells. There's inadequate perfusion to the area. Maybe that's the brain, maybe it's a specific cell or a group of cells, but it's not getting the blood, so it's not getting the oxygen that's needed and the glucose that's needed to keep the nerves functioning. Okay, let's look further at injuring it, and we're looking specifically at blows to the head here. These are the outside injuries. We'll have closed head wounds. That's the contrecoup. Any other kind of blow to the head where the skull is not broken open. But we'll have bruising inside and pressure inside. So those are pressure-related damage. So it starts as an injury from the outside, but it's going to end up being one of those starvation kind of things. Because of the increased pressure in the head, inside the head, there's inadequate perfusion of new blood. Now with open head wounds, we're not looking at pressure problems. Pressure-related damage. We're looking at immediate tissue damage. The skull's been broken open, so we've got brain tissue, gray matter that's been hurt, and we're looking at eventual infection to the area. Other injuries, accident-type injuries, are damage to the nerves or the spinal cord. And if we're looking at the spine, we're looking at the level of the spine. That's what's going to tell us the extent of the injury. With these, we're going to get ischemia and inflammation. Remember, injury sets off the inflammatory process. We're going to get cerebral edema, increased intracranial pressure, neuropathies, paresthesias, pain, paralysis. Now let's look at the spinal cord. There's different areas of the cord. And in general, the lower the damage to the spinal cord, the less effect it's got on the individual. So down in the sacral area, if you have sacral damage, we're looking at influence on the way the genitalia can function. If the damage is in the lumbar area, that's when we typically think of waist down paralysis, we're looking at lumbar damage. Thoracic area, if the spinal cord is damaged there, we're looking at problems with the chest and the inner arms. Those muscles cannot be controlled voluntarily very well. And the cervical spines, the higher up the cervical damage, the more and more problems we're having. The more and more it's approaching total body paralysis. So if we're looking up C1, C2, C3 in that area, these people can't breathe. It's interfering with involuntary nerves as well as voluntary nerves once we get up that high. Okay. We're looking at injuries from infections, autoimmunity, and tumors. It includes the same group of problems that was on the previous slide, but we're adding demyelination to this. Quite often that's an autoimmune problem where the individual nerves are losing the myelin sheath. Remember, the myelin is what makes it possible for a nerve impulse to travel very quickly and smoothly down a nerve. Because of myelination, we can move our body parts smoothly. All right, starving it. Starving the nerves, starving the brain, starving the nervous system. That's inadequate perfusion. And like we said, can be from increased pressure, so there's no room for fresh blood to get in, and it can be from just plain old ischemia, so there's inadequate perfusion either locally or systemically. The injuries, here's our review again. The injuries, whether it be the spine, the brain, whatever, if we've got the ischemic process, inflammation, cerebral edema, increased intracranial pressure, all of those move, the injury is moving towards the starvation end here. Inadequate perfusion to the area because of these things. All right, let's look at this starvation. And nobody else calls this starvation than me, I don't think, but that's essentially what's going on. Let's look at that pathway. Okay, inadequate perfusion to an area, that's called ischemia, and it can be a local process or a systemic process. So there's not enough oxygen and nutrients to the area. That leads to infarction of the cells. Remember what infarction means? The cells cease to function and will die. So that's called injury. That kicks off the inflammatory response, which is going to increase intracranial pressure. From there, we can go right back up, and it's a circular action. The increased pressure means that's less blood getting to the area. So we have a circular action here. But we also, from this, we're moving into electrolyte imbalances and acidosis. Nervous system damage. Let's look at the clinical manifestations, and again, it depends on the extent and location of the damage. Specifically, let's look at neuropathy. It's damage to the nerve. It may be a degenerative process. Quite often that's what we're talking about when we say neuropathy, but technically it could be from trauma as well. But it results in delayed nerve conduction and impaired sensory function. There's something wrong with a nerve. The impulse can't get transferred, whether that be a nerve conduction that tells you to move your arm, whether it be a nerve conduction that says, ow, that hurts. Either way, neuropathy is going to affect both of those. We quite often see numbness, tingling, paresthesias, and pain associated with neuropathy. It's kind of like when you sleep wrong on your arm and it falls asleep. That's frequently the sensation that comes with neuropathy. If one area is affected by neuropathy, we call that mononeuropathy. An example, there's been some kind of damage, scar tissue has developed, and is causing pressure on the nerve. Well, we're only talking about one area of the body here. So that's mononeuropathy. If multiple axons are affected, that's called polyneuropathy, and that's quite often what's going on in multiple sclerosis, diabetes, exposure to toxic agents, and nutritional deficiencies. Okay, demyelination. That's degradation of the myelin sheath. And again, the purpose of the myelin sheath is to keep the nerve impulse running smoothly and quickly down the axon. Now, demyelination might cause neuropathies, but there's a generalized slowing of the nerve impulse. Motor functions become slower and more jerky, and sensation can be altered.